So go ahead and pause. I want you to work out 10, 11, and 12 and also do the checks. And when you get done, press play and we'll see how you did. All right, see you in a bit. Okay, here we are. We are back. So I'm finding the equal sign. The equal sign divides the equation into two sides. I see that I have a variable here, 3/4 n and also 1/4 n. I know that they're fractions, but you can do this, I promise. So the cool thing about these fractions is they have a common denominator, okay, already. So we just need to figure out, well, which one of these is the lesser coefficient. So the coefficient here is 3/4 of this n and 1/4 of that n. So 1/4 is less than 3/4. So that is going to be the one that we are going to move, okay? So in order to move it, what we're going to do is we're going to look and see how this 1/4 n is related to this 1. Well, it's related through addition. So that means that we're either going to be doing addition or subtraction depending on what this number is, okay? So we're either doing addition or subtraction. Now this is a positive number, which means we're going to be doing a negative number. So we're going to go negative 1/4 n to both sides, negative 1/4 n. And what's going to happen, 1/4 n, positive 1/4 n minus 1/4 n is going to cancel out and become 0, which is exactly what we want because we don't want the n's on this side. What we're left with on this side of the equation is 1. Okay, then we come over here, 3/4 n minus 1/4 n. The great thing about this is it has a common denominator, so I'm going to keep that common denominator of 4 and just go 3 minus 1, which is 2 n. And then I'm going to bring this down plus 2. Okay, so I'm still trying to figure out what n is. This is a two-step equation, so I'm going to keep this together until the very, very end, okay? So, which means I'm going to be getting rid of this positive 2, and I have to do the inverse operation of the positive, which is a negative. So I'm going to subtract 2 to both sides. This positive minus 2, that equals 0, and then I'm left with 2/4 times n equals 1 minus 2. Well, this 1 is positive, this 2 is negative, so when the signs are different, you take the difference. So I'm going to find the difference between 2 and 1, which is 1. And then I'm going to look at these two numbers independent of their signs, right? I'm just looking at 2 and 1. And I'm trying to figure out which number is bigger. Well, 2 is bigger and 2 is negative, which means my answer is going to be negative 1. 1 minus 2 is equal to negative 1. Okay, now I'm trying to get n by itself, and it's not by itself. There's that fraction there in front of n, but that's okay. If you remember, whenever there's a fraction multiplied by n, the way we get n by itself is to multiply by the reciprocal of the fraction, which would be 4/2. And we're just going to do that to both sides. So what happens is, remember when you're multiplying fractions, first you look to cross cancel, and the 4's cancel out and become 1, and then the 2's cancel out and become 1, and we just have this whole 1 times 1 bit, which is 1 times n is equal to n. And so now we have n by itself. So it's a really great tool, multiplying by the reciprocal, to get n by itself whenever you have a fraction in front of n. So then we just need to do this bit right here. So I'm going to make that negative 1 a fraction, negative 1 over 1. And we look to cross cancel, but we can't because there's a 1 involved. So we just multiply across. So negative 1 times 4, a negative times a positive is a negative. 1 times 4 is 4, divided by 1 times 2, which is 2. And we have negative 4 divided by 2. So I'm going to do the signs first because we have a negative divided by a positive. A negative divided by a positive is a negative, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So our answer is n equals negative 2. All right, cool. So we're going to do the check. So I'm going to write the word check. I'm going to rewrite the original equation, which is 3/4 n. Oh, that's not a 4. 3/4 n plus 2 equals 1/4 n plus 1. Okay, now I'm just going to substitute n, negative 2, wherever I see an n, which is in two different locations. So I have 3/4, and then I'm putting in negative 2 here, plus 2 equals 1/4 times negative 2 here, plus 1. Okay, So since I'm multiplying this 3/4 times a -2, I'm going to make this a fraction. I'm also going to make this a fraction, okay? So basically, these parentheses, that means multiplication. So I'm just going to multiply these two fractions. I'm going to do each side independently, right? So I have multiplication here, and then I have addition. So order of operations says I have to do the multiplication first. So I'm multiplying fractions. I'm going to look to cross cancel, right? So I look at 1, 3, can't cross cancel anything there. Then I looked at 2 and 4. Is there a common factor there between 2 and 4? And the answer is yes. They both have a common factor of 2. So 2 goes into 4 2 times, and 2 goes into 2 1 time. Okay? So that's pretty much that. So now I just need to multiply across. So 3 times -1, I'm going to do the signs first. A positive times a negative is a negative. 3 times 1 is 3, divided by 2 times 1 is 2, plus 2 equals, and then I'm going to this side of the equation. What do I have? I have multiplication, and then I have addition. So order of operations says I need to do this multiplication first. So they're fractions, so I'm going to look to cross cancel and then multiply across. So let's look to cross cancel. 1 and 1 can't do anything there. What about 2 and 4? Yeah, they both have a common factor of 2. 2 goes into 4 2 times. 2 goes into 2 1 time. So now I multiply across. 1 times -1. I'm going to do the signs first. So a positive times a negative is a negative. 1 times 1 is 1 all over. 2 times 1 is 2. So I have -1/2 plus 1. All right, great. So now I just need to simplify each side of the equation. And since I have fractions and I'm adding, I need to get a common denominator. So I'm going to make this 2 over 1. The common denominator between 1 and 2 would be 2, so I need to turn this into a 2. So I'm going to multiply the bottom and the top by 2, which is going to leave me with -3 over 2 plus 2 times 2 is 4 over 1 times 2 is 2. And I'm just going to take a break on this side of the equation and just finish this since I'm kind of have my train of thought here. So I have a common denominator, which is great. So I'm just going to go -3 plus 4. So this is a negative, this is a positive. The signs are different, so I take the difference. So the difference between 4 and 3 is 1. And I'm looking at 4 and 3, which number is bigger? 4 is bigger, 4 is positive. So that means it's going to be a positive 1, and then I just keep that common denominator of 2. Okay, so all that ends up equaling 1/2. Okay, now I'm over here. I'm going back here. I have -1/2 plus 1. Well, I'm going to make this a fraction, 1 over 1. And I need a common denominator, so it's going to be 2. So I'm going to multiply the bottom and the top by 2. So that means I end up having -1/2 plus 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, I have a common denominator, which is great, so I'm going to keep that 2. And then I'm just going to go -1 plus 2. I'm going to add the numerators together. Well, this is a negative and this is a positive, so I have to take, the signs are different, so I have to take the difference between 2 and 1, which is 1. And then I look at the numbers, 1 and 2, which number is bigger? 2 is bigger and 2 is positive, which means my answer is going to be positive. So, whoo, that was a lot of work, but it's a true statement. 1/2 is equal to 1/2, which means the solution that we found up here is the solution to the original equation. So if you did that right, great job. That was wonderful. Okay, on to number 11. So here we go. Let's see how you did on this one. I'm going to locate the equal sign, which is right here. That splits the equation into two sides. I notice I have a 3 in here and a 4 in there. I'm going to notice the one that has the lesser coefficient, which would be here. That's the one I'm going to move. So I'm going to do the inverse operation. This 3n is related to this 9 through addition. So I'm going to do the inverse operation of addition, which would be subtraction. I'm going to subtract both sides of the equation by 3n, and that works out because a positive 3n and a negative 3n equals 0, which is exactly what I want. I want to get rid of this n altogether on this side of the equation. I'm left with 9, and then 4n minus 3n is just the same thing as 4 minus 3, which is 1n. I put the n on the end, and 1n is the same thing as just n equals 9, and I always like to write that n on the left side, so n equals 9. That's the answer. So let's go ahead and check it, see if it's right. I'm going to write the word check, rewrite the original equation. 9 plus 3n equals 4n. And then I'm going to substitute 9 in for n, and there's the n is located right here, and it's also located right there. So, yeah, 9 plus 3 times, I'm going to put 9 in there for n, equals 4. I'm going to put 9 in there for n. All right, great. So I'm just going to do each side independently. 9 plus 3 times n. Order of operations says I have to do the multiplication first, so I'm just going to rewrite that addition. 3 times 9 is 27, equals, I'm going to move over here, 4 times 9 is 36. And then I'm going back here just to do the addition, 27 plus 9. So 27 plus 9 is equal to 9 plus 7 is 16. Write the 6, carry the 1. 1 plus 2 is 3. Equals 36. So hey, we have 36 equaling 36, which is a true statement, which means this solution is the solution to the original equation. So if you got that right, great job. All right, on to problem number 12. So here we go. I found the equation sign that separates this equation into two sides. We have variables on both sides, so we have 5/8 in here and 7/8 in here, and they're fractions, but you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. Woo! You can do it. You can do it. Woo! Okay, let's do it. All right, so we're looking at these coefficients, and we have to move the lesser coefficient. So that would be here. 5/8 is less than 7/8. So we are going to be moving this one right here, the 5/8 in, to the other side of the equation. So we do that through inverse operation. We want to notice how this 5/8 in is related to the 5, and it's related to the 5 through addition. So that tells us we're either going to be doing addition or subtraction, depending on if this is a positive or negative number. And this is a positive number, so we're going to do the inverse of a positive number, which would be a negative number. So we're going to go negative 5/8 in, and we're going to do that to both sides, negative 5/8 in, okay? So 5/8 in minus 5/8 in, that cancels out and becomes 0. We're left with 5 on this side. And then we just do 7/8 in minus 5/8 in. They have a common denominator, which is great. So we're just going to keep that 8 on the bottom. And then so we just do the numerators. 7 minus 5, which is 2 in, and then put an n on it, plus 7. Okay? So we're trying to get n by itself. Okay? And we notice that there's this 2/8 in right there and the plus 7. So we're going to keep this together until the bitter end, but first we must get rid of this positive 7. So the inverse of this plus 7 the inverse operation would be a negative 7. So we're going to subtract 7 to both sides. So that's what we're doing. We're subtracting 7 to both sides. We have 5 minus 7. This is a positive, this is a negative. The signs are different. You take the difference. And the difference between 7 and 5 is 2. And then we look at 7 and 5. 7's bigger, 7's negative, so our answer is going to be negative. So we have negative 2 equaling 2/8 n. And we're trying to get n by itself. But it is multiplied by a fraction. So whenever we are trying to get a variable by itself and it's multiplied by the fraction, we need to multiply by the reciprocal. And the reciprocal of 2/8 is 8/2. And we're going to do that to both sides. 8/2. And I'm going to put that in parentheses, okay? So what's glorious about that is we're multiplying fractions, so we always look to cross cancel first. So the 8's cancel out and become 1, and then the 2's cancel out and become 1. It all becomes 1 times n, which is really just n. And so we did our job. We got n by itself. So now we need to multiply this fraction over here. 8/2 times negative 2, and we're going to make that negative 2/1. So first we're going to look to cross cancel. The 8 and the 1, we can't do anything. But this 2 and the 2, they both have a common factor of 2, so they can cancel out. 2 goes into 2 one time, and 2 goes into 2 one time. So now we could just multiply across. So 8 times a negative 1, that's a positive. I'm going to do the signs first. A positive times a negative is a negative. 8 times 1 is 8 over 1 times 1 is just 1. So we have negative 8/1, which is just the same thing as negative 8n, and I always like to write the n on the left side. So we have n equals negative 8. And that is our answer, but we are not done because we're going to check our solution. All right, woohoo! Okay, so I'm going to check it. That means I'm going to rewrite the original equation. 5/8 n plus 5 equals 7/8 n plus 7. So I'm going to go ahead and stick in -8 here for n, and also over here. I'm substituting it in both places. And since it's negative, I'm going to put it in parentheses. So I have 5/8 times -8 plus 5 equals 7/8 times -8 plus 7. And since we're multiplying this fraction, I'm going to turn this -8 into a fraction. So it's -8/1. And now I'm going to look to, whoa, sorry about that. Let me adjust. A little excited, I guess. Okay, so I'm going to do one side of the equation at a time. So I have multiplication and addition. Order of operations states that we have to do the multiplication first. So the fractions, I'm going to look to cross cancel. There's nothing I can do with the 1 and the 5. However, 8 and 8 have a common factor of 8. 8 goes into 8 one time. 8 goes into 8 one time. Now I can just multiply across. A positive 5 times a -1, I'm going to do the signs first. So a positive times a negative is a negative. 5 times 1 is 5. All over 1 times 1, which is just 1. And I'm going to rewrite this plus 5 here. Equals, and now I'm going to do, I have a multiplication here and addition. So order of operations says I have to do the multiplication. So I'm going to multiply fractions. Cross cancel first. So 7, 1 can't do anything there. But 8 and 8 have a common factor of 8. So 8 goes into 8 one time, 8 goes into 8 one time, and now I can multiply across. So 7 times a -1, I'm going to do the signs first. A positive times a negative is a negative. 7 times 1 is 7. And then multiply across down here. 1 times 1 is just 1 plus 7. So I'm going to simplify this. -5 divided by 1 is just the same thing as -5. Plus 5. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. -7 divided by 1 is just the same thing as -7 plus 7. So we have -5 plus 5, which is equal to 0. And that's equal to -7 plus 7, which is equal to 0. So there we go. 0 equals 0. It's a true statement, which means our solution, n equals -8, is the solution to the original equation. So if you got that one right, yokeregemashita. You did a wonderful, spectacular job, and I'm so proud of you. Okay, turn the page. We're going to go on to problem 13, and this is a story problem, and we're going to go ahead and work on this one together. So I'm going to go ahead and read it first. Okay, it says the members of the campus roller rink pay a yearly membership fee of $50 plus 5 times each time they go skating. Non-members pay $10 each time they go skating. How many times would both a member and a non-member have to go skating in a year in order to pay the same amount? Okay, so when I'm looking at this problem, what I see is we're talking about a roller rink, right? But what we have is we have two things. We have members and we have non-members. Okay, so we have members and we have non-members, right? Okay, so for members, the total cost for members is of a campus roller rink pay a yearly membership fee of $50. So they pay that every year. They pay $50. Okay, that's a one-time fee. So $50, and then it says plus, so we know that we're doing addition, 5 times each time they go skating. So we don't know how many times they go skating. So the number of times, that becomes our variable. That's our x. So we're going to say, we're going to define our variable. We're going to say let x equal the number of times a person goes skating. Okay, so we're defining our variable. So let's try to write an expression for the members. So members of the campus roller rink pay a yearly membership fee of $50 plus $5 each time. So whenever you see this $5 each time, that's going to be 5 times x. So it's going to be 50 plus 5 times x. That's how much it costs for members, okay? Now let's go ahead and figure out how much it costs for non-members. Non-members pay $10 each time they go skating. That's it. There's no fee. They just pay a higher rate each time they go skating. So $10 each time, we don't know the number of times, so that's going to be our X. So $10 each time is going to be 10X. That's how much they pay each time they go. They go 10X. So it says, how many times would both a member and non-member have to go skating in order to pay the same amount? So what we want to know is hey, what does X need to be for members to equal non-members where they pay the same amount? So all we're going to do is set those equal to each other. So our equation ends up being 50 plus 5X equals 10X. That is our equation. That's what we are going to solve. We're going to figure out what X equals, because that equals the number of times it takes for members and non-members to be paying the same amount. So I'm going to locate the equation sign. Okay, that separates the equation into two equations. I notice that I have a variable on this side, and I also have a variable on that side of the equation. So I'm going to need to move them and get the variables on the same side of the equation sign. So in order to do that, I need to move the one with the lesser coefficient. And so I'm looking, this has a coefficient of 5, this has a coefficient of 10. So 5 is the lesser coefficient, so that's the one I'm going to be moving. So to do that, I have to figure out, well, how is this 5X related to the 50? It's related to the 50 through addition. So I'm going to do the inverse operation of addition, which is subtraction. I'm going to subtract 5X to this side of the equation and also subtract it to this side of the equation. Positive 5X minus 5X ends up being 0. So I got rid of the variable on this side and moved it over there, which is exactly what I want. So I'm left with 50 over here. And then I need to simplify this side of the equation. 10X minus 5X is just the same thing as 10 minus 5, which is 5, and then bring the X down. And I'm trying to figure out what X is, so I need to get X by itself. And right now there's that 5X, which means 5 multiplied by X. So I need to do the inverse operation of multiplication, which would be division. So I need to divide both sides by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1 times X is X. So now I have X by itself, which is perfect. And now I need to do 50 divided by 5. And 5 goes into 50 10 times. So 50 divided by 5 is 10. So that means X equals 10. That's my answer, which means how many times would both a member and a non-member have to go skating in a year in order to pay the same amount? So you would say a member and a non-member would have to go skating. X represents the number of times. So go skating 10 times in order to pay the same amount. So that is how that problem works. If you got that one right, great job. Okay, cool. All right, I will see you next time. Have a wonderful day, and bye-bye.